por favor apague o ponga en modo de silencio su teléfono celular. En caso de activarse la sirena de evacuación, mantenga la calma y diríjase a las salidas de emergencia en la parte frontal o posterior del lado derecho del auditorio y siga las instrucciones de nuestro personal y brigadistas. Los servicios sanitarios se ubican en el cuarto piso. Si requiere de información adicional, por favor, refiérase a nuestro personal presente en esta actividad. Se les recuerda que en este auditorio es prohibido fumar y consumir alimentos. Gracias por su valiosa cooperación. Le deseamos una feliz estancia.
¿Se escucha? Sí. Bueno, buenas tardes a todos. Quiero agradecerle a nombre de la cohorte de Juventud y Democracia y al European Partnership for Democracy por estar participando de esta sesión.
Thank you for participating in
Aprovecho de
this
saludar a la red
session. I want to
latinoamericana de
greet
Jóvenes por la
the
Democracia, de la
Latin
cual soy miembro,
America
y a los
Network
representantes de las diversas
of
organizaciones
youth
que hoy nos
and
acompañan.
members
También saludamos a
of
quienes están de
different
forma
organizations that
presencial
are
acá en
present,
Costa Rica y a
those
quienes
who
nos
are
siguen de
present in
manera
Costa
virtual
Rica, and
desde
those who
Estados
follow us
Unidos, Corea del
virtually in
Sur,
the US,
Zambia y
South
Países
Korea,
Bajos
Zambia,
como coanfitriones de esta segunda
Netherlands
cumbre por la
as
democracia.
co-host of this
Para
event,
comenzar,
this
quiero
summit.
hablarles sobre el trabajo que hemos estado realizando desde la Youth Political and Civic Engagement Cohort, más conocida como la Youth Democracy Cohort. Esta es una plataforma que se lanzó como parte del año de acción de la Cumbre de la Democracia en 2021, que incluye a gobiernos, sociedad civil y al sector privado para promover la buena gobernanza y la renovación democrática en todo el mundo. Esta es una plataforma inclusiva para tomar medidas significativas para implementar los compromisos adquiridos en el Summit for Democracy acerca del compromiso político y cívico de los jóvenes a través de recursos, experiencia, investigación, actividades y logros. La Youth Democracy Cohort está compuesta por 8 organizaciones
We're made up
co-líderes:
of 8
la Comisión
organizations,
Europea, el
the
Gobierno de Ghana, el
European
Gobierno de Nepal,
Commission,
el Gobierno de Costa Rica,
Nepal,
el European Partnership for Democracy, Africtivist, la
European Democracy Youth Network, and International Institute for Democracy and Election Assistance, IDEA.
Además, se han unido más de 60
More than
organizaciones
60
miembros de
member
todo el mundo
organizations
con el
around the
objetivo de
world have
promover el
united in order
compromiso
to promote
político y
this
cívico de
political
los jóvenes a nivel
commitment
global.
of the
En
youth
las etapas
globally.
iniciales de la Cumbre por la
National
Democracia, la participación política de los
stages,
jóvenes no ocupaba un lugar destacado en la agenda de los gobiernos participantes.
it was not
Según
a
el
must
Democracy
in
Dashboard, solo 6 países adoptaron
6
compromisos
countries
sobre la juventud durante la
adopted
primera Cumbre por la
commitments
Democracia,
after the
que
first
enfatizaron la necesidad de
summit for
desarrollar una
democracy to
cohorte
develop
sólida y dinámica para poner a la juventud en la agenda de la democracia global.
guidelines
La Youth
to
Cohort fue
place the
creada por
youth
gobiernos
in the
dedicados,
first line.
organizaciones internacionales y la
This
sociedad
was
civil.
created by
Y
the
desde
civil
entonces se ha
society
convertido
and
en una
has
de las
become
cohortes
one
más
of the cohorts
activas y
more
dinámicas.
active and dynamic.
Estamos trabajando
We're working
activamente para que más
actively,
países
working for
adopten
more
compromisos
countries to
relacionados
adopt
con la juventud
commitments
y para
related to
incorporar
youth
la
and to
participación
incorporate
juvenil en
the
otros temas
youth
democráticos y
participation in
cohortes.
democratic issues
La
and
cohorte se
cohorts.
lanzó
Cohort
oficialmente el 12 de
officially
septiembre del
was
2022
launched
y se estructura
December
en 3 grupos.
2022,
El
3
Co-Leadership
groups,
Group, que considera las
co-leadership
8
group,
organizaciones que mencioné anteriormente, el
the
Core
other
Group,
organizations,
que
the
comprende
core group,
organizaciones y gobiernos
organizations
que
and
deseen
governments
involucrarse más
that want to
estrechamente en la
be
cohorte
involved in the
mediante la
cohort
implementación
in,
de al menos
to the
un evento
implementation
o
of just
actividad que
one
contribuya
event
al
to
año de acción.
contribute in this year of
General
action.
Group,
The
que
general
incluye
group,
organizaciones de la sociedad
organizations
civil,
from the civil
gobiernos,
society,
organizaciones
governments,
internacionales,
international
socios del sector
organizations,
privado, etcétera,
partners of the
que
private
deseen
sector that
avanzar
would
en los
like to
objetivos de la cohorte,
advance
asumiendo al
the
menos
goals
un
of the
compromiso en el
cohorts,
caso de los
assuming one
gobiernos
commitment
o
in the case of
apoyando la
governments, or
implementación de al menos un compromiso en el
supporting at
caso de las
least one
organizaciones de la sociedad civil, que
in terms
contribuya
of the
al año
civil
de acción.
society.
La cohorte de jóvenes
The
es
cohort
actualmente
of
una de las
youth
más
is one
diversas
of the most
geográficamente, con una
diverse
cantidad importante de países no
geographically with an
occidentales,
important
instituciones y
non-Western
grupos de la sociedad
countries,
civil participando, incluidos Nepal, Ghana y
Nepal,
Costa Rica
Ghana, and
como
Costa Rica,
co-líderes, además de
as
varias
co-leaders
organizaciones de la
and
sociedad civil y
other
otras
organizations
organizaciones
of
del
civil
subglobo.
society and
Los objetivos
southern
principales son
countries
promover el
to
compromiso
promote
político y
the
cívico de los jóvenes,
political
la
commitment of
comprensión
the
de los
youth to
principios
understand the
democráticos
democratic
por
principles
parte de los jóvenes,
on
así
the
como la
part of the
diversidad y la
youth and
inclusión.
diversity and
Además,
inclusion.
busca apoyar a los jóvenes y organizaciones
Supporting
juveniles y ayudar a los jóvenes a
organizations
reinventar una
to
forma de
reinvent
democracia más
a way
inclusiva y más
of
responsable.
democracy, more
La
inclusive, more
cohorte ha trabajado
responsible.
una serie
Cohort
de entregables.
have worked with
Primero, el
several
desarrollo de un menú de
deliverables,
posibles
a
compromisos, un documento que se
menu of
lanzó en febrero
possible
y que propone
commitments
una variedad
was
de
launched in
compromisos modelo
February,
para que los países adopten para priorizar el compromiso cívico y político de
goals
los
to be
jóvenes.
adopted.
La cohorte planea
Cohort
realizar
plans
o apoyar acciones, por ejemplo, a
support
través de pequeños
actions,
subsidios para
small
promover los
subsidies
posibles
to
compromisos,
promote possible
abogar para que
commitments,
sean adoptados
to
y evaluar su
advocate to be
implementación a
adopted,
nivel
and
nacional o regional.
to
En
promote
segundo lugar, el desarrollo del Youth Participation
implementation. Youth
Cohort
Participation
Handbook,
Cohort
una
Handbook,
iniciativa liderada por
an
el
initiative
EEYN y el
promoted by
EDEPT, que comprende estudios de casos de
EEYN
iniciativas
and
exitosas de
the
empoderamiento
EPD,
juvenil que han resultado en una
empowering
mayor participación
strategies
juvenil y que
for
pueden ser
the young
replicadas en otros
to
países.
participate
Esto
in
incluye tanto
more
historias de éxito
participation,
como lecciones
successful
aprendidas.
stories, lessons learned.
Pueden encontrar este manual
You can
en
find this manual in Youth
youth.democracycohort.org.
Democracy
En
Cover
tercer lugar, el desarrollo de un índice de
development
participación
an
política
index
juvenil
of
que busca llenar un
participation
vacío
seeks
en
to
los datos
fill
disponibles
a void
sobre el estado de participación de
in
los
terms of
jóvenes en las
participation
esferas
of the youth
públicas.
in public spheres.
El European Partnership
European
for
Partnership
Democracy
for
está
Democracy
realizando un estudio de
is
alcance
doing
para
its
evaluar la
study
participación de los
for
jóvenes en los
evaluating the
asuntos públicos,
participation of the
las
youth in
elecciones,
public
en la sociedad
affairs,
civil y en los medios de
elections
comunicación.
in the civil society,
En
and
más de
in
15 países.
the media in more than
El
15
objetivo es que este
countries. The
índice se
goal is
amplíe
that the
aún
index
más para
is
incluir más
expanded
países
to
en
include
una
more
etapa
countries
posterior.
in our
Entre julio
in
y
other
marzo del
stages,
2023,
July,
los miembros
March,
de la cohorte juvenil,
members
incluidos el
of this youth cohorts, EPD,
el Accountability Lab y Idea
and
International, organizaron más de 15
EDYN organized
eventos
more than
diferentes de
15
participación
different
política y cívica de jóvenes,
events,
además de reuniones del grupo central y la
meetings of
cohorte
the
de
central
coliderazgo.
group and the
Se
cohort
organizaron
of leadership,
talleres, webinars, diálogos,
workshops,
etcétera,
webinars
que han buscado crear
to
vínculos con
create
otras cohortes y
links with
temas
other
democráticos, por
cohorts
ejemplo,
and democratic
juventud y
issues,
desinformación y
information
juventud
of
e
youth,
integridad
youth
electoral.
in
En octubre,
during
Idea
elections.
International, uno de nuestros
In
co-líderes,
October,
con el
one of
apoyo
the
de la Comisión Europea, se
co-leaders,
comprometió con la
together with
sociedad
the
civil de
European
Kenia, Moldavia,
community,
Nepal y
committed
Paraguay
with
para
Nepal and
aumentar
other
la
countries to
conciencia de la sociedad
increase
civil sobre
the
la cumbre.
awareness
Se
of the
desarrolló
civil
una
society
encuesta
about
para
the
ayudar a
summit.
identificar la percepción de las
There
comunidades
was
sobre el Summit for
a
Democracy,
survey
en especial
distributed,
atención en cómo los jóvenes y
especially
la sociedad
how
civil
the youth
perciben las
in civil
recomendaciones
society
nacionales que se
perceive
entregan y
national
para identificar
recommendations to
recomendaciones que
identify
deban agregarse.
recommendations that should
En
be
octubre del
added. In
2022
October
se realizaron talleres
2022,
entre grupos de la sociedad
workshops,
civil y
civil
autoridades nacionales en los
societies and
4
national
países
authorities in
para
4
discutir la
countries
encuesta y su progreso realizado hasta la fecha.
for
El
discussion.
conjunto de recomendaciones modelo que
The
se habían
guidelines.
desarrollado en base a la
Model
encuesta,
discussions
así
based
como
on
formas de
the
fortalecer la
survey to
colaboración entre
strengthen the
autoridades
collaboration
nacionales y la
between
sociedad
national
civil durante el
organizations
Year of Action
and
o Año de Acción.
civil society.
El
and
objetivo
the Year
era
of
que estas
Action.
recomendaciones modelo
The
fueran
goal,
discutidas y acordadas por
This
más de
was to be
100 organizaciones
discussed
de la
for more
sociedad
than
civil
100
para
organizations of the
fortalecer
civil
la
society
participación
to
política de
strengthen
los
the
jóvenes
political
y ser agregados a los
participation of the
compromisos
youth
nacionales de los
and
países
to be
de la
part
Cumbre por la
of
Democracia.
the
El Laboratorio de
country's
Responsabilidad, otro miembro del Core
responsibility
Group,
lab.
realizó un video
Another
sobre la
member of the
Youth
core group
Democracy Cohort,
produce a video
y ha estado encuestando a los ciudadanos
been
de la
surveying
DRC sobre el progreso de su
citizens of
gobierno en relación con sus
DRC
compromisos.
in
Los
terms
hallazgos
of
se han
their
resumido en
commitment.
una serie de infografías en
Findings,
inglés y francés.
several
También
documents in
trabajó
French and
con
English,
IDEA
and also with
International en
IDEA
el poste
International,
y anteriormente y en el desarrollo de las recomendaciones
developing
modelo en
different
Nepal.
model
También produjeron
recommendations
un
in
video sobre
Nepal,
los compromisos
a
del
video
Summit
about
for
the
Democracy en
commitments
Nepal, centrándose en el conocimiento y las
Nepal
percepciones del público y las posibles mejoras de
in
recomendación.
terms of the public and
La
possible
cohorte se ha
recommendation. The
propuesto
cohort
activamente hacer que el proceso de la
actively
cumbre sea mucho más inclusivo,
want to be
facilitando
more
a través de su
inclusive,
estructura de 3 niveles.
facilitating
Se ha invitado a la cohorte, a
more
la sociedad
inclusive in
civil
the
de países
three
que no forman
structures,
parte del proceso de la cumbre.
inviting
Se ha buscado que la
countries
juventud
that are
sea
not part
incluida
of the
como
summit
un tema en el
it
trabajo
was
democrático de
included
los
as a
países
democratic
y que la participación juvenil sea
working
un
of the
tema
countries and
transversal en
youth
esta segunda
participation
ronda.
to be a cross.
Al incluir el tema en
Sectional
varios de los eventos regionales de la
event.
cumbre, en Costa Rica se
In
centra
Costa
en
Rica
la
is centered
participación
about the
democrática
participation
juvenil y se
of the
organizará un
youth
evento
to
paralelo
organize
hoy
event,
dedicado a la
parallel
cohorte
event.
juvenil. Su objetivo es tener un
The goal
enfoque
is to have
verdaderamente
a
global al
global
invitar
focus,
también a un gran
inviting
número de
also a
organizaciones de la
number of
sociedad
organizations
civil
of civil
fuera de la Unión
society
Europea y de Estados Unidos.
outside the EU and the
En la
USA.
cumbre regional de Zambia,
Regional
que se enfoca en las elecciones,
Summit in
la cohorte
Zambia,
de jóvenes ha coorganizado una
this
sesión sobre el
cohort of
financiamiento de los
youth about
partidos
financing
políticos,
political
que tendrá un
parties
enfoque
that will
específico
have a
en la
specific
participación política de
role
los jóvenes.
in the political
Finalmente,
participation of the
la
youth.
Youth Political and
Youth
Civic
Political and Civic
Cohort busca
Engagement
continuar su
cover
trabajo después de esta
wants
segunda
to
cumbre con el
go
apoyo de
ahead
la
with the
Comisión
work
Europea.
with the
El
European
proyecto
Commission, the project
WYDE de mujeres y jóvenes en
WYDE of
democracia apoya el
Women
componente
in
de
Youth
jóvenes del
support
EPD,
the EPD
que cubre la
that
Secretaría Técnica
takes care
de
of
la
the
cohorte,
technical
la inclusión,
secretariat
participación y las actividades de la
participation
Organización de la
activities
Sociedad Civil en
of
el
the
sur global,
organizations
en la que
of the civil
trabajan
society.
participación cívica y política de los jóvenes de la cohorte. Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Ahora quiero dejar con
Now,
ustedes a Aisha Dabo,
Aisha Dao,
Africtivist, and Jeremy Appert from
Africtivist y
EPD
Jeremy
para
Appert from
presentar
EPD.
el menú de posibles compromisos.
the many of possible commitments.
Good afternoon.
Buenas tardes.
I'm bringing greetings from the motherland, Africa. I hope you enjoyed your lunch and you won't be sleeping. It's been a long day. Thank you for your attention. I'm here with Jeremy. So I will talk about the process that has led us to the menu of commitment. During the year of action, the Youth and Engagement Participation Cohort held several consultations and workshops to come up with the commitments that we are going to present today. We had to agree and make the commitment as inclusive as possible so that no youth in the world is left out. We made the commitment clear, concise, and actionable. They are meant to empower and engage youth around the world to strengthen democracy. The commitments can be adopted as reforms, initiatives to improve youth participation and rights in their respective national contexts. There are 33 commitments grouped under 5 themes. They are available in English, in French, in Spanish, on the website youthdemocracycohort.org. Now, we have to advocate for states to commit to these commitments and adopt them and act on them. So Jeremy and I will now read the 5 themes and give one example of action under each theme.
Hello, buenas tardes. The first theme, is to prioritize youth voices in governance, and that can be done by example, by strengthening the independence, transparency, and inclusivity of national youth councils and similar coordinating structures of youth organizations.
Thank you. 2, supporting youth in government. That can be done by establishing youth quotas which promote inclusive youth engagement rather than create competition among diverse populations of young people.
We also have a theme about supporting youth freedom of expression, and that can be done, for example, by promoting youth access to voting, by facilitating access to citizen IDs and voter registration.
4, promoting a culture of youth political participation. And that can be done by investing in civic education that promotes young people's understanding of their civic and political rights, that is accessible to all youth populations, especially young women, ethnic minority, indigenous youth, and children under 18, and young people with disabilities.
And the final theme of commitments is about promoting a culture of human rights amongst youth. And that can be done, for example, by committing to ending all forms of discriminations against women.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Aisha y Jeremy. Ahora para la presentación oficial del Manual de Participación Juvenil del EDYN y el EDP, dejo a Darina
Danila Oyeshko, the president of the EDYN, and Simon Badji from EPD.
Buenas tardes. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It is my honor to speak to you today at the Summit for Democracy as part of the Youth Democracy Cohort. Today I represent European Democracy Youth Network that brings together more than 500 members from 23 countries in Central and Eastern Europe, Western Balkans, Baltics, Caucasus. They are all politically active people, journalists, civil society representatives, and politicians. Among our members, we have young men who fight in the war against the country aggressor Russia to defend the freedom. We have young people who lead pro-EU movement in Georgia, who shape youth policy in North Macedonia, who promote politically constructive dialogue in Albania instead of polarization. They are members of parliaments, local councillors, journalists, bloggers, you name it, who really change the life of their communities, nations, and also regions. Who, after our parents fought against totalitarian regimes, look into the future, into a democratic future of our countries. We all know that young people are effective change makers if they are given the proper rights to participate. We know that involving young generation in decision-making contributes to better diversity, innovative ideas, and as a result, better policy making. So we really want to have that, and also for democracy that delivers for all. In this light, knowing that today the governments come together at the Summit for Democracy to discuss the state of democracy, to adopt new commitments, is very reassuring to me as a young person. Hopefully, some of these commitments will be from our menu. Also, besides the commitments, as we just heard, our youth cohort focused on developing a handbook on youth participation. This is this book. And we worked on it together at the European Democracy Youth Network in collaboration with European Partnership for Democracy. And this handbook that we are presenting today contains 24 case studies from cohort member countries in Africa, Latin America, Europe, also Asia, where youth movements, networks, organizations share their best practices on how to effectively drive youth political and civic engagement in different sectors and countries. So these best practices focused on many different areas, and some of these are democracy support, protecting environment, fighting corruption, then also countering polarization, increasing participation in democratic processes. This is just to name a few. For us at Eden, it was quite an adventurous journey to work on this handbook. The process started in November 2021, when in the membership conference, more than 50 members came together in Tirana, Albania, and one of the topics that we discussed was this handbook and what it can include and what will be the value of it for the society. As we finalize it right now, this handbook is meant to inspire youth organizations, also to strengthen young people's voices in democratic processes generally. But also through the handbook, our cohort offers an evidence base for policy solutions for democratic governments who want to work with young people, who want to empower youth political and civic engagement, as well as really address the barriers to meaningful young political participation. And then we have enabling factors. These enabling factors, identified by organizations from Costa Rica to Denmark, Malaysia, showcase how governments can really create those environments, create conditions for young people, for initiatives to succeed and also thrive. And I want to mention today a few of these enabling factors. This is to the attention of the governments of the Summit for Democracy. So one of the most frequently recurring was long-term commitment in terms of financing, so long-term funding. Several youth organizations mentioned it, and something that is crucial for campaigns, projects, initiatives to be there in the first place. We know that it's quite simple, and we know, and I mentioned it quite a few times already, but still it's not always there. So we want to highlight it. Second enabling factor mentioned by many is an opportunity for young people to connect with key political leaders, and this can be an effective strategy for them and great opportunity. And a few more that I want to mention is, for example, ensuring legal framework for youth inclusion in policymaking, then also long-term and consistent capacity building for young people. And the last one that I will say right now, there are many more in the handbook. We will be distributing them today. It's continuous collaboration in development through policy dialogue for youth to be responsible citizens for public good as a general. And overall, this handbook provides case studies from two different perspectives. On one side, it describes youth-led movements and organizations perspective, and on the other side, also youth programming successes and lessons learned. At Eden, we had the pleasure to work with more than 30 organizations to gather these stories. We expect that this handbook is also an opportunity for organizations to learn about each other's initiatives. We hope for more collaboration. We hope that this handbook will be a record of efficient initiatives and that can be really scaled up and replicated all across the globe. To close, I want to underline that looking at the stories that are in this handbook, hearing the stories of many young leaders today and yesterday, I'm more and more convinced that young people are not the leaders of tomorrow, as we mentioned it over and over again, but of today, that they should be recognized as partners, not as only beneficiaries or actors by governments and development organizations. And maybe one more point is that they deserve to be included fully, not because of the mere numbers that was quoted over and over again, but because they bring the value to the table. Gracias, thank you. As we say in Ukraine, дякую. And Anna Simona, over to you.
Thank you, Darina. So, hello everyone, buenas tardes. My name is Anne Simon, and I work at the European Partnership for Democracy as a program coordinator. And as you know, the European Partnership for Democracy is part of the co-leadership of the cohort. And our job is basically to coordinate the work of all the different organizations and make the deliverables happen and the cohort continue working. So, the realization and the release of this handbook on youth engagement is truly a joy for EPD and for the Youth Democracy cohort today. And we are happy that Eden called us at the collaboration to make this book happen. When we discuss the participation of young people generally, one of the first and most important arguments advanced to justify our involvement is the number. There are many young people. You have figures and data showing the gaps sometimes between young population and youth participation, then slogans and campaign, different campaigns calling young people to participate. But the question that is not often asked or deepened enough is the why. Why should young people participate in democracy? Because of their number? Is that our only strength? Is it because of duty or because we have that right? What can we bring? Why? And for me, this handbook is an excellent answer to this question. An answer in 24 chapters, in 24 projects, in 24 charisma, and in 24 countries. We need to recognize that the subjects of democracy and governance or political affairs are not always the priority of youth, neither yesterday nor today. And in Eastern Africa, a study of the Friedrich Neumann Stiftung showed that the primary concern of young people was jobs and growth. And same with other stories in this region in Africa and in other regions of the world. Nevertheless, young people from the stories featuring in this book send us the message that young people are ready to participate, actually. But they are demanding that the rules are fair, the rules of the games are inclusive and credible. Young people want to participate in democratic processes where the rules are credible and inclusiveness is assured. We have learned many lessons through this book, and we invite you to read it to notice it. The lessons learned from this handbook are numerous and diverse and support this observation made. We can learn that young people are creative, that they are sometimes daring or insolent and bold, but they are willing to participate. They do want, but in the right conditions. This book also tells us that young people from different parts of the world, from all continents, have similar preoccupations. The respect of human rights, the rule of law, fair, transparent elections, the inclusion of minorities, freedoms of speech, of association, and the list goes on. It also tells us that the ideals of the human rights and democracy are not the privilege or the ideal of some nations or just some people living in some part of the world, but truly something universal and addressed to all nations. With this book, you can also travel on all continents and discover different contexts and different stories. It is a really interesting book, really, really. I encourage you to read it. A handbook, then what? After reading this handbook, what would we do? Why did we even do this book? First, the cohort wanted to reunite all the member organizations in one project. When you have such a big movement, it is a challenge to get everyone on board, to work together on something. And having such a book, working together on such a book, was a way to engage everyone. We also wanted something tangible and concrete to bring to the Summit for Democracy, and something to inspire young people of this generation and of the next generations. I will finish by thanking, of course, Edin, our partners on this project, and that proposed this project to the cohort and allowed us to collaborate with them. The cohort is a platform where all member organizations are encouraged to propose ideas, projects that we can work on together, and it's not a platform where the co-leaders just decide something. Every voice will be heard if you propose something, and we really are eager to hear what you want to propose us and do together. Also, a big thank to the team who worked hard on this handbook, gathering the stories, managing the project, editing the many stories that we received. They aren't all here. Some are attending other Summit for Democracy in Zambia or others, or are home. But it's important for us to mention them today because they did a precious work. A handbook is a lot of work, and we learned it together. Thank you to the editors, of course, and the designer for the fantastic job. Thank you to the European Commission for its unfailing support and enthusiasm in the cohorts projects. And of course, a big thank to all the donors, all our donors, the donors of the projects, because they allow us to achieve all these projects and make these little victories of democracy happen. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Darina. Quiero dejar ahora con ustedes a Sara Kognuk, activista por el cambio climático, y a Vanessa Salazar, de la Asamblea Nacional de Jóvenes, para que presenten el caso de estudio costarricense.
Buenas tardes, es un gusto compartir con todas, todos y todes hoy. Agradecemos mucho la invitación para poder compartir sobre la experiencia del Sistema Nacional de Juventudes, que lo consideramos como todo un logro país.
Is a country accomplishment. It allows for democratic participation of the youth at Costa Rican level, even is being one of the first spaces that a country was able to build efficiently. To tell you about this system, it's in the handbook that is mentioned. In the handbook we just heard about, Costa Rica has an entity dealing with the youth. The National Office for the Youth was created, but there were different challenges that needed to be dealt with, needed to be more open, and decision-making process with leadership, which are solid and strengthened. The law of the youth law, it was created. Now is the national system of the youth. This national system created four different entities to articulate the effort in pro of the youth. These four entities are the system. The first one, the Vice Ministry of Youth, which is the political branch. When we have the National Council of Public Policy of the Youth, the technical branch. And then we have two instances that are key for the participation of the youth. The first one is canton committees, which is a local. They have an incidence of spaces and organizations at the canton level, like schools, for example, which is key to strengthen democracy, and the consulting branch. We have, it has a nationwide impact. This entity has an assembly, which is a manifestation of the whole network. This network is made up of representatives of a lot of sectors, but more than 100 persons. This space, the system as such, allows us to have a representativity throughout the country, and will allow us to generate articulation between the technical and political and the youth, which is key to work in terms of youth and to generate different actions in terms of law and political. The assembly elect representatives that made up. We have a representation of youth people in the board of this entity. We can have an intersectorial work because within this board there are other sectors represented, like the Ministry of Health, of Work, of Education. It allows for an intersectorial approach, not something isolated, which is the tendency.
Good afternoon. The National System of Youth has achieved with success to have a national survey of youth that was carried out in 2007, 2013, and 2018. This survey provides statistics about the work, family life, health, and the perception of rights among young people. With what they're helping to expand the basis of testing or proofs what policies of youth to inform about politics. This enables youth to explore different inequities that existing, so to find the different origins and inequalities associated with that. Is why this survey helps us also to feed the process of building public policy. This policy has been done in 3 periods. In this occasion, it was done from 2020 to 2024, thanks to an articulation between the components of the national systems of youths. This has been done, carried out since from the local level with young people, and also not only at external level. We have achieved this also at internal level behind a desk. Besides that, it incorporates key realities that up to today represent risks for democracy, which was the action axis of climate change. The national system of youth has allowed also the participation of the young people in different spaces, as our governance that goes from national and also international level. And in topics such as employability, climate action, mental health, among other topics. The national system of youth has been very valuable. We continue strengthening it on a daily basis. This in order to ensure that it will comply or meet the objective for which it was created. That is why the national system of youth has been strengthened on a daily basis through the agreements and processes such as the Ibero-American Convention on Human Rights of Youth, the 2030 Agenda, the Ibero-American Agreement of Youth, and the Regional Action Plan for Rural Youth of the countries of SICA. And to end, this story has had an astounding success that we wanted to comment to you. And we consider that all of the countries, there must be an official platform of youth participation, but this one has to be seen in an articulate manner with the public policy, interinstitutional public policy, and with the technical accompaniment as such, and able to focus on specific objectives. We can only strengthen democratic participation of young people if we improve the conditions in all of the spheres of their lives. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sara and Vanessa. I want to give them a good round of applause to all of the panel members that have been here on the stage. And I want to introduce Get Goffrey, Director of the Human Partnership for Democracy, that will moderate the following discussion panel. This panel has its name, Youth Forward, Implementing Commitments for More Youth Engagement. Which are the opportunities for advocating for adoption by participating countries?
Goffrey, el director de EPD, European Partnership for Democracy, una red de organizaciones que apoyan la democracia por todo el mundo. En primero, parece que hablar español durante una semana no está bien para mi voz.
Okay, it seems, I apologize that I don't speak so much Spanish. I hope you listen well, and for the interpreters also. We're going to talk on this discussion in Spanish, but also in English. I wanted to begin thanking the government of Costa Rica on behalf of all the cohort. The cohort of Democracy and Youth was the first cohort that was officially launched. It was in September 15 of last year, 2022, in Brussels. At that moment, we did not know the date of the second summit, but for us, it was 100% clear the lack of engagement of youth and democracy is a crossover problem that affects all of the levels of political and civic participation. Many historic factors, economic factors, and political factors forbid or hinder a significant participation of youth in public life, and especially in political life. And so we acknowledge that each national context is different. But likewise, the moment has arrived of acting, and assume responsibilities. So we have created then several instruments to inspire and also to forward our work, or move forward with those instruments that have been just presented. The cohort has as its ambition to implement and support actions to facilitate and improve participation of youth in civic and political life. Now with me, I am going to begin on my right-hand side. I have with me John Costedoa Musek. He's a program official of the European Union from Belgium. Olga Caballero, director of Alma Cívica in Paraguay. And Kulis Moniango, executive director the Youth Cafe in Kenya. Now we're going to discuss about the future of the cohort and also see the roots. Camila has already explained a little bit the history about the cohort, and what this cohort has been able to achieve a strong participation and a capacity of activating and carrying out specific things. And that is because it found support. It found support, technical support, and also financial support from organizations of civil society and also from governments. I am going to begin with how in the first summit, the European Union or Commission adopted an action plan of youth in 2021, and also with another foreign program of 1.5 million euros, I think, for human rights and also for democracy. So, why the European Commission, since it assumes an active role in this cohort, why did the European Commission assume that? I'm sorry, his microphone is not, I cannot read him. His microphone is not sounding.
El agradecimiento no se entiende.
I was saying that we thank the United States for launching this summit for democracy, and also Costa Rica for hosting it. Ken had a very good reason for which the European Commission assumed a vital role in the cohort. What happened was that the European Commission began the cohort Youth and Democracy as of an idea from Scott Warren of USAID. Scott Warren is here with us. He's here with us in this place. And from that idea, of his idea, we began. The experience of the summit and also the experience of this cohort of Youth and Democracy has been an opportunity to build bridges and networks all over the world among many countries. Kenya, Moldova, Costa Rica, Senegal, Nepal, Paraguay, United States, the European Union, just to mention a few. These partnerships, North-South partnerships between institutions, government institutions, and civil society organizations, these partnerships where the youth, the participating youth, the ones that implemented them. The youth have been the ones, the engine behind this youth cohort and for youth and democracy, as we had expected, and that's why we appreciate it. We thank them. Thank you. But, Jean, why is youth so important for the European Commission? Why in this moment, 2023, is so important for the strategy of the European Commission? In first place, the youth themselves were the ones who asked to be empowered in our democratic societies. Maybe not so much within the political parties, but yes, in activities that maybe are not partisan activities, but very political activities. The youth are willing to advocate for democratic reforms, act as observers, citizens of elections, and be together with accountability and artistic activities, as this morning was mentioned by the other colleague. But this strategy of strengthening democracy is not based only in youth, but also in a partnership and cooperation transgenerational. The cohort Youth and Democracy expects not only offering spaces to the youth, providing them of responsibilities, but also put at their disposition the experience of their elders in which they can support themselves. Thank you, Jean. Now we're going to continue with Nolia. Alma Cívica, with Olga. Alma Cívica has worked at local level, and you are now beginning the mission of citizen observation, electoral civic observation with a focus on the youth in Paraguay for elections in April. Observing the commitments, which in your opinion are the most important ones for the situation now in Paraguay? Okay, first of all, thank you for the invitation. Actually, I'm very impressed when they say the youth does not participate, the youth does not care what happens with democracy and politics. We in Paraguay have proven with Alma Cívica and many other organizations working and there are some colleagues from other organizations, they're too youth. All of you are young people, and we, in 2021, we have mobilized over 2,000 volunteers willing to be present in the elections day, but one reason to participate and understand the process. The civic electoral activities is space, a teaching space and civic space that allows not only being present in an impartial manner and with tools and techniques that help us understand the electoral process, but also they also allow how to see that the youth wants to participate and be in these processes. And that's why it is so important tools as the ones we're working on, that we're launching as the spaces, and other organizations at the international level, they're opening space in order to connect and talk about these subject matters, inspire us, but especially have specific tools that enable us to go to the field and, among everything else, to carry out activities that respond to the people that are working on the basis at the communities. We cannot have tools that are very nice in paper, but you cannot activate them. So I think that there are three commitments, as everything that we're reading and listening in these days enable us to go down to the field and see the real requests of the people. It's no coincidence that the international report made there was a priority from the youth of Paraguay. Currently, over 50% of those registered to vote in the elections are youth between 18 and 39 years of age. What does that tell us? We have the tools to strengthen the process of the people that want to participate, the youth that want to be in politics, and not necessarily partisan politics. We have the institutional mechanisms that enable the youth to have access to spaces. No, we do not have them. The electoral situation enables us to see not only as a speaker of the people who want to participate and the youth are present, but a speaker that we need also to build new ways and forms of participating in different spaces. And it is not easy today. I was telling you, it is not easy in everything that's happening. We have a very delicate political context in Paraguay where we need to protect with everything, and we're going to move forward still. And the youth, as this morning was said by, or recently, the youth is not for tomorrow, or not as tomorrow, it's now, it's now. Now is that we need to protect our democracy. That's why we want this. We're not the only ones. We have many other organizations, and we're articulating, creating, and understanding where to work with the different organizations, and not to invent the wheel again, but to work together in actions that enable us to move forward, as the observing electoral mission and other organizations is extremely important. Thank you, Ore. Let's see if I can improve better in English.
I'd like to go into a bit of details here. If you take the example of Kenya, and you want to be involved, let's say you're a young person, you want to be involved in politics, okay? You want to be involved in politics. What do you think, based on your experience, is the biggest hurdle for a young person to be involved in political life in Kenya today?
First and foremost, I believe that our young people are our greatest resource. I think this is true here in Costa Rica, as it is true in my own home country, Kenya. With respect to youth involvement and the hurdles that they face around their political participation, from our own experiences with work around elections and young people, and we've had a lot of engagements with youth, studies, and focus groups. One of the key issues that come out persistently is the cost of running for office, particularly for young people. Kenyan members of parliament, for instance, are one of the most highly paid members of the parliament in the world relative to the economy. That means that we've seen instances where people have had to quit private sector jobs in order to compete for elections. It therefore raises the price for a young person to compete in the elections. We have the Election Finance Regulation Act, which has not been implemented because of vested political interest. But we think that there's a window of opportunity if we put a cap, for instance, in election financing to make it mandatory for you to have a certain limit of spending, disclose the expenditure, such that more young people can have space and resources without undue competition from the older generation to make it possible for young people to run for office. But our own work are complemented by emerging studies, for instance, conducted by our partners at the International IDEA, that say that over 52% of young people in Kenya do not believe that democracy works. So this skepticism, complicates the equation with respect to how you can encourage young people, both young men and women, to see a pathway in career, in public office, and therefore thereby benefit, the public domain with their unique and innovative ideas. And yes, I think young people make huge contribution. When we did an audit of policies and legislations that are youth-friendly, a majority of them were proposed by young members of parliament, which at that time only represented 6% of the entire National Assembly in a country whose median age, the average age, is 19 years. And this is mostly true for the rest of the sub-Saharan Africa.
If you're thinking about, there's a big barrier in terms of the finance that are needed. Is there something that political parties could do? Is there something from the political side that could be done to improve? Are there sort of tweaks that could be made to the system that allow greater participation of youth through those the representative core of democratic institutions, the political parties?
Absolutely. I think political parties can open spaces for youth participation through the political party structures as a mechanism, and one of the clear mechanisms of enfranchising young people and socializing them into life in the public domain through political offices. We see a huge lack of mentorship opportunities that are targeted at young people, such that we can be able to raise the next generation of leaders that are young, have fresh ideas within the political party systems. Political parties have been captured by the elite and the elder capture of the political party, such that political parties have their own owners. And the owners might not necessarily be responsive to including young people in the structures. We need to move away of beyond looking at political parties as private properties and look at them as instruments of power that include everyone, including young people, by offering clear, demonstrable opportunities through, for instance, mentorship, nurturing of the leadership potential of young people to be the future leaders of their nations.
Great, so maybe I'll come back to the case of Paraguay then. Because in Paraguay, Alma Civic, you work with lots of young people around the country. Is there a way to sort of de-block what's happening now with youth participation? Is there a sort of way that you could strengthen participation of youth in a tangible way?
Sí, de hecho,
yes, as a matter of fact, our limitations are even institutional, because recently, at the 35 years of age, someone can be elected president, can be elected, and other ages go from 30 to 25 years. So we have a sphere, an important group of youth and citizens that are very committed, even working from the basis in order to participate in the political formation or training and in democracy, and being able to acquire tools to work in the field usually come from different spaces that the political parties open. But they're not open to everyone. If you're not part of the political party, if you're not a militant of the political party, you do not have that many spaces. On the other hand, usually many youth, especially the student fights and union fights, many leaders are born there. They find spaces in other places. But we have this fact of outstanding and be able to connect to a partisan or political career, but many times it's without wanting, because they don't want it, but it's something anecdotal. When there is no support accompanying or institutionality accompanying the participation of the youth within the politics as such. So actually there are too many limiting factors, but there are many opportunities also. As I said some time ago, the majority are youth, and actually strengthening and actually ensuring their participation in that sector from public policies that's been talked a lot about in these days. They're key and necessary. Being able to somehow work with those that already know, with the youth that already know, not bringing a package of projects, but understanding the dynamics of the context, the locality, and the people, help people work and participate. Understanding that youth participation in policies, on politics and democracy and civil society currently have changed. They're different. They're not the same as we did before. There are many ways of participating and making your voice heard. To be able to develop spaces for training for youth, supporting organizations that are working in these soft skills that sometimes very difficult to measure throughout time, the impact they have. That's why we see this with the limited, that we cannot present projects in 5 or 6 months, because there's a building of skills that we must encourage within the groups. And the youth working at local level, many times, they do not know the tools, they do not receive the information what is happening, and they're very centered on the existing opportunities to be. So actually, the political parties do not count with a budget, a percent of the budget would be worthily to strengthen leaderships in the political parties, and there are no institutional mechanisms at state level to develop and be able to work this on the youth. And there are also many other organizations, then they mix us with political parties, and then they put in that whatever we're doing when we're actually working for the common well-being. And what's important here is understanding that this has to accompany the gradual process, because otherwise it will be a chimera and nothing will end up ruined. So talking about opportunities, what are the spaces of training, encouragement, political participation, civic participation of youth? Of Alma Cívica or of the country? The country. Actually, as I commented, the political parties tend to have some spaces, but they're very limited, and you cannot enter easily there. There is no actual view, a national view, but very focused on certain places of the country. And it's very difficult to have access to this type of trainings that enable us to see beyond, not only from a political party or another political party, but we have the total context. So in the universities, in the student unions, and the speaker of reality, what's happening in the youth, and many times they are accompanied. And unfortunately, when there's no institutional or public policy to promote and accompany the strengthening of young leaders in these spaces, they end up in nothing else, or it's a very difficult roadway for the youth. And two things may happen. I will say this: either they capture the bad practice, these great youth that are emerging in different spaces, or unfortunately, or as approach, we lose capital, huge social capital on the way, because we don't have that strengthening participation and training spaces for the youth.
Stay on the same theme to you, Willis, before turning back to Jean. If you speak about sort of the level of encouraging engagement, and ways to encourage engagement that are not particularly linked to political parties or being active politically yourself, but actually being involved in democratic processes, in civic life, are there recommendations that you would give in Kenya or maybe even the region for encouraging that among young people?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in order to bring more young people to be civically active, we need to educate them. In Kenya, for instance, and they speak to a number of sub-Saharan African countries where my organization is mostly active in, most young people learn about their civic responsibilities, duties, as well as rights through their peers, through their family networks, and through informal structures, and not through formalized structure, let's say through education. And if you, when I was growing up, for instance, I learned history and government as a subject. So you grow up knowing that you are an individual in an ecosystem that appreciates that you have duties and responsibilities. But that is not the case. And we see a rollback, as we see through emerging body of evidence, that right now, as we speak, only 18 countries in Africa are democracies. And we see a backsliding, and this has a ramification on how young people get socialized into the space. There's an opportunity to have comprehensive, particularly civic and voter education, that are targeted at young people, particularly younger subset of youth. In Africa, where we operate, the definition of youth is a bit broad. It's 18 years to 35 years, which is the Africa Union official definition. So the approach towards bringing this cohort of young people to the fore should not be uniform. We should not look at them as homogeneous, because the needs of an 18-year-old young person is certainly different from the needs of a 35-year-old young person. So we have to have a disaggregated way of education, of raising awareness with respect to civic responsibilities of young people.
Thank you very much, Willis. We only have a couple of minutes left, so I will turn back to you, Jean, where we started. Ahora sabemos que habrá una tercera cumbre.
There is a third
Sabemos
summit,
también que la Comisión Europea es
and the
co-líder
European
del cohort
is a cohort
Democracia y Juventud.
of democracy and youth.
Entonces, muy rápido,
So,
¿qué piensan
in a
del
few words, what do you think about the future? What are we going to do in the cohort? It's clear that the European Commission will continue their support to the cohort of youth and democracy, not alone, but jointly with the other members, particularly EPD, International, EDIN, Affectivist, and evidently Costa Rica, and with all those who want to meet with the cohort of youth and democracy according to their established goals. We will have, in a few minutes, we have a message of the Commissioner, the European Commission, Jutta Urpilainen. In this message, we will see the expression of this will of continuing, of going forth.
I will ask everybody to please stay in the room. The ambassador of the United States to the UN will now address us, but there need to be some changes here to the room, so I'd ask you please to all stay. And before that, I could ask you to all give a massive round of applause, please, to our panelists who are here. Muchísimas gracias a ustedes, a los tres. Y quería terminar para decir también una vez más,
to finish.
muchísimas gracias al gobierno
Thank you
de Costa
to the
Rica,
government of
en el nombre de
Costa
todas
Rica on
las
behalf
organizaciones
of
de
all the organizations of the cohort,
democracia y juventud.
democracy and youth. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Muy buenas tardes, rogamos a todos tomar asiento para poder iniciar. Me complace anunciar en este día al señor Ministro de Relaciones Exteriores y Culto de Costa Rica, Arnoldo André Tinoco, así que le damos la bienvenida al señor Ministro. Buenas tardes.
Arnoldo Tinoco, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Costa Rica, let's welcome him.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon.
Excelencias,
Excellencies, distinguished guests, members of the Supreme
Hoy
Powers.
Costa Rica tiene su
Costa
evento
Rica
nacional de la
have
Cumbre
its
por la
national
Democracia,
event of the Summit for
promoviendo
Democracy,
el papel de la
promoting
juventud
the
en los
role of
espacios
youth
políticos
in
y
political
democráticos.
spaces and democratic
Este evento
spaces. This
culminará
event
un arduo proceso de coordinación y colaboración
come
no
to an
solo
end
entre
after
nuestras
a long
instituciones,
process of
sino
cooperation
también con
between
socios internacionales, aliados
institutions and
estratégicos
international
y
partners,
países amigos que comparten
allies,
valores comunes y
countries
principios
that are
democráticos.
friends, they share the same
Sin su
democratic
cooperación y
principles.
apoyo no
Without their
estaríamos
support
aquí
and
y no
cooperation, we
tendría la
would not be here
oportunidad de
and we
presentarles
have the
a
opportunity
nuestro próximo
to
orador.
introduce our next
En primer lugar,
speaker.
quisiera aprovechar la
I would like to
oportunidad
take
para
the
expresar el
opportunity to express,
agradecimiento en
to
nombre del
thank
gobierno de Costa
on behalf
Rica
of the government of
a
Costa
los
Rica
Estados Unidos de
to the
América
United States of
por
America
considerar a nuestro
for
país
considering our
como
country as a
co-anfitrión de la segunda cumbre de la
co-host of the
democracia.
second summit of
Este
democracy.
evento ha
This
sido
event
una
has been
excelente
an
oportunidad
excellent opportunity so leaders
discutan temas
around the world discuss topics related to democracy, challenges, prosperity,
y realmente honran
and honor our tradition and democratic institutions.
siguiente oradora
Our next speaker is the ambassador of the United States before the United Nations, Mrs. Linda Thomas Greenfield. The ambassador is the permanent representative of the United States before the Organization of the United States. Is a career diplomat, very important positions, Subsecretary of State for African Affairs, leading human resources, distinguished career of Thomas Greenfield in foreign affairs include he was ambassador in Switzerland, Pakistan, Kenya, Gambia, Nigeria, Jamaica, among other important positions. Her dedication to the public service has been exemplary and have shown that the youth have the passion, the skills to make a positive difference in the world. Her career is a witness about the importance of participation of the youth in politics, civil spaces, and human resources. We are lucky to have Mrs. Linda Thomas Greenfield as our next speaker. Ambassador, welcome to Costa Rica. I'm sure these leaders, these young leaders, including myself, we are very anxious to hear your words and to take advantage of your experience to impact political and social affairs. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Buenas.
Foreign Minister Andre for that very generous introduction. I'm very honored. The United States is pleased to co-host this second Summit of Democracy with the governments of Costa Rica, the Netherlands, Republic of Korea, and Republic of Zambia. And thank you everyone for joining us in person and online. I'm particularly excited to see all of the young people who have joined us today and who are engaging in this event. We're here today to focus on you, to promote your role in political and democratic spaces. After all, you are not only the future of democracy, you are also the present. And so I'm glad you are present with us today. I want to start by thanking President Chavez and the government and people of Costa Rica for welcoming us to your country. All of us across the hemisphere are so grateful for your hospitality. As a career diplomat, coming here made me curious about the long history of distinguished American ambassadors here in Costa Rica. Right now, we're proud to have Ambassador Cynthia Tellez representing us. Welcome, Ambassador. In this role, she follows in the footsteps of her father, the great Ambassador Raymond Tellez, the first Hispanic American ever appointed a U.S. ambassador. Speaking of first, Terrace Todman, a personal hero of mine, became one of the first Black ambassadors from the United States to a Latin American country when he took up residence here. But before any of these legends came, there was Alexander Dimitri. He served here from 1859 to 1861. He came from the great state of Louisiana, which is where I grew up and which is still very close to my heart. He attended Georgetown University, an institution where I also proudly taught before this role. He then returned to Louisiana, created and organized a free school system there. He spoke 11 languages. He was a brilliant man. But there was something else that was very unusual about him for an American ambassador of that day and age. He was not white. His father was Greek, and his mother was Creole, a mixture of African, Greek, and French descent, which made him the first person of color to attend Georgetown, and arguably the first ever ambassador of color from the United States. Here in Costa Rica, he was respected for his intellect and his deep love and knowledge of the region. So it might have been surprising that in 1861, he quickly dropped the job he loved and returned back to Louisiana. The reason: the United States was at war with itself. And here's the twist. Alexander Dimitri chose the wrong side. He betrayed his country by taking an administrative post in the Confederate government. He not only failed his country, but he failed a hard test of democracy. He supported a rebellion against our democratically elected president, Abraham Lincoln. I share this story to make a simple point. Democracy is difficult. Every country has to grapple with those who seek to undermine it. So I'm not here to lecture you or to lecture any person or any country on how to be a democracy. I'm not here to say it's easy, because it's not. Instead, we come here with humility and with lessons learned that we want to share. As the world's oldest surviving democracy, the United States has seen its fair share of challenges. From the whiskey rebellions during the first years of our nation's history, to the Civil War, to the attacks on our Capitol on January 6th, time and time again, we've been forced to face down those who would undermine the will of the people. And so it's no wonder we see the challenges all around the world today. For many years, the civil society group Freedom House has tracked the number of countries that have become more democratic and compared that to the number of countries that have seen democratic declines. For 17 years in a row, the number of countries that have lost freedoms has been bigger than the number of countries that have gained freedoms. In other words, overall, the world has consistently become less democratic, less fair, less free. But according to this year's report, we may be approaching a turning point. The gap has shrunk. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, the number of countries that became less free was about the same as the number of countries that become more free. We've begun to change the tide. For his part, President Biden similarly believes we are at an inflection point. He believes that the decisions we make in the coming years will determine the course of the world for decades to come. The question is, can we still do big things together? Can we seize the future and all of its possibilities? Can we demonstrate once and for all that democracies deliver for their people? Right now, we are. And I see at least 3 reasons why. First, people around the globe are recognizing the limits of authoritarianism. From Moscow to Managua, from Beijing to Caracas to Tehran, these regimes have chosen corruption and control over care and competence. In the People's Republic of China, for example, the authoritarian government enforced a strict zero-COVID policy through repression and propaganda. This resulted in communities desperate for food in whole cities where people were barely able to step outside. This led to a cascade of deaths, and that led to powerful protests, people standing up for their fundamental freedoms. Similarly, in Iran, Mahsa Amini's death at the hands of the so-called morality police sparked peaceful protests across the country. The Iranian regime responded by torturing peaceful protesters, arresting tens of thousands of people, and killing men and women and children in the streets. This is not a convincing argument for authoritarianism. Russia has also helped disabuse the world of the notion that autocracies are ascendant. Putin thought that when he invaded Ukraine, Kyiv would quickly fall and Europe would crumble and bend to his will. He did not believe that the democracies of the world would stand together. He was sorely mistaken. By striking at the heart of the UN Charter, Putin only helped band us closer together and reminded us of what we value most and what we share in common. Now Russian families are questioning why their husbands and sons are being sent to die in a pointless, needless, illegal, immoral war. If you were free to choose to live anywhere, would anyone choose to live under such a regime? The same is true right next door in Nicaragua, where people live in fear of their repressive governments. The regime targets anyone it deems a threat and has used repressive laws to strip the legal status of thousands of NGOs trying to help local communities. The result has been a total loss of hope. Refugees, vulnerable migrants, asylum seekers are fleeing their homes in search of a better life, somewhere where the government supports the people. All of this leads me to my second point, that democracies are currently demonstrating with vigor together that we are better at delivering for our people. At our first Democracy Summit, nearly 100 governments made commitments to advance democracy, defend human rights, fight corruption, and counter authoritarianism. Then we called on the democracies of the world to deliver during a year of action, and we have. Over the past 2 days, we've heard a great deal about the breadth and depth of that progress, and it is astonishing. For our part, the United States is proud to have delivered major advances on infrastructure, healthcare, climate, and manufacturing for the American people. We're building roads and bridges across America. We're providing healthcare reforms that save lives and jobs that pay a decent wage. We've made the biggest climate investment in history, one which will spur clean energy investments all over the world. And we're delivering both at home and abroad. Our shared prosperity is deeply connected to our shared security. Of course, we've been proud to see other summit partners make good on their commitments too. In the Dominican Republic, for example, the government promised to modernize its anti-corruption laws. Last year, the government did exactly that, signing a bill that established dozens of local-level anti-corruption commissions and ethics offices around the country. Similarly, in Ecuador, where I just came from, the government followed on a summit commitment and established a national anti-corruption strategy. These commitments and so many others show the people of the world that democracies deliver. Democracies are making our daily lives better, and democracies have our backs. Because while I don't want to speak for other countries about your domestic agendas, your accomplishments speak for themselves. Our citizens are seeing results. Our societies are freer. Our economies are stronger. Our efforts to combat challenges like COVID-19 are more effective. Our people are happier. We have much to be proud of, but we also still have so much work to do. Which brings me to my third and final reason that we're closing the democracy gap. Young people are stepping up. We see this in repressive regimes like in Iran and Burma and China, where protests are being led in particular by young people who refuse to give up on human rights and fundamental freedoms. But we're also seeing young people leading in places like Chile, where you recently helped elect a 37-year-old president. That kind of representation is important because right now, more than half of the world's population is under the age of 30. You're the world's largest generation of young people in history. Excuse me. And you've been calling our attention to the crisis that matters to you most, from climate change to universal human rights. After the first Democracy Summit, governments, civil society, and the private sector came together to form democracy cohorts. These are platforms to collaborate on a wide range of issues, from financial transparency to media freedoms to information integrity. The Youth Political Participation Cohort is particularly active and has been a central supporter of today's event. Through the leadership of your co-leads, the European Commission, Ghana, Nepal, Costa Rica, the European Partnership for Democracy, the European Youth Democracy Network, and AfriTivest, you have produced a whole slate of outcomes, including a handbook on youth participation and a menu of draft commitments, which were presented to me today by young people. Unfortunately, despite these and so many other extraordinary efforts, far too many young people are still excluded from informing the policies that impact their lives. That's especially true for those who experience discrimination and marginalization. When I spoke to a number of you earlier, you told me how important it is that your voices are heard, that how important it is for us to invest in you. From my vantage point, we do need to invest in you. We need to engage you. We need to empower you. After all, you are inheriting not only our successes, but also our failures and our challenges. The truth is, my generation has not always gotten it right. That's how it always goes. The folks who come before you try our best, but we know that we get a lot wrong. So for every generation, there comes a moment where you have to learn new lessons and find new ways of building a better world. And for you, that time is now. We're looking to you for leadership. We're looking to you to rebuild and refresh our policies, our economies, our health systems. We're looking to you to steward our communities, our countries, our hemisphere, our world in the right direction. But it's on you, it's on us to include you, to not just give you a seat at the table, but to put you at the head of the table. And that's why today I'm thrilled to announce that together with the Community of Democracies, we're launching the Global Youth Democracy Network. The Youth Democracy Network will provide a direct line for young people to reach government officials. It will ensure you are essential players in the policy-making process. We will also select network participants for an annual Youth Democracy Fellowship. These fellowships will provide opportunities that will strengthen our democracies, opportunities like studying how to end corruption, working with civil society to defend human rights, or engaging with international and domestic government officials. Our vision is to inspire, to train, and unite the next generation of civic leaders and activists, and we're asking everyone to join us in building this out, because we need you to transform this turning point into a trend line. To ensure that governments around the world include all people in political life and decision-making, young and old, men and women and children, LGBTQ plus people, people with disabilities, Afro-descendants, and indigenous people, all religious groups, all minority groups, everyone. Democracy must be representative. It must be inclusive, and it must be universal. This year, we're celebrating the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We need to make these rights real for everyone. This year, we mark the halfway point to the Sustainable Development Goals. We need to come together and meet those goals no matter what it takes. This year, we've talked a lot about democratic backsliding, but backsliding implies a straight line, that you can only move forward or backward. The reality is there will be twists and turns. There will be ups and downs, curves and arcs and spirals. But it's up to us to make sure that line gets where it needs to go, to bend it forward toward freedom, toward justice for all. The work is far from finished. We have so much left to do. Let's do it together. Let's show up to our elections. Let's do the hard work of showing up between elections in public service and through civil society by backing the freedom of the press and the work of the judiciary. And let's show up where there are no elections, where the elections are far from fair and free, and help those who seek to have their voices heard. Let's ensure young people are at the forefront of that work, leading the charge. And together, let's build a freer, more democratic world for us all. Thank you very much.
Buenas tardes. En 5 minutos daremos inicio al evento principal de la tarde. Les agradecemos permanecer en sus asientos.